So, Saul, this is Rebecca speaking. And so, as I mentioned to you, I am so thrilled to meet you. When we found out that you were interested in participating in this Scent Stories series that we're doing, which is really trying to band the Usher Syndrome community together by telling our stories individually and also being able to find the commonalities that we all experience in living with both vision and hearing loss.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Well, I'm going to try not to be so starstruck about interviewing you and talk to you like a normal human being and not the famous Saul Simon, okay?
Okay.
So, Saul, you and I share advanced bionics in common. I am also cochlear implanted with advanced bionics, but I understand that you are the first person who is deafblind or who has Usher syndrome who was cochlear implanted with advanced bionics. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. The time was about 1995. I was selected by Dr. Navo, who did the surgery along with Harvard University and MIT and the Mass Eye and Ear. And they were looking for a candidate who was able to have a voice to express themselves, and they needed someone to experiment with. So I was selected to have the implant, and in a way I was afraid because it would be a new experience. And so my wife and my family wanted me to have it done because we had no way of communicating unless I had it done. Once I had the implant done, it took me 5 or 6 days to get acclimated to the hearing of the implant. And it was amazing because for the first time, I heard my wife talk when I got out of bed, and she said, "Good morning, Saul." And that was the first time I heard her say, "Good morning." And when I heard that, I jumped for joy, and I went around the house where we were living, pressing the doorbell, putting the radio on, and I was able to hear the way I used to hear many, many, many years ago. So life went on since that period, and I had to train myself to learn new sounds that I never heard before, such as the crickets on the ground. I never knew there were crickets. And the other thing, I like to hear the ocean waves, which I never heard, or the raindrop on top of the car I never heard before, and so forth. So there were many new sounds that came into my life, and I became accustomed to recognize the sound.
Wow. So, Saul, I so appreciate you sharing these little pieces of information that you finally had access to, because I remember in my own process of being cochlear implanted in 2013, all of a sudden, as I was reacclimating to being able to hear digitally, like you just described, I had access to sounds and information I didn't even know I was missing. And they're very similar to what you described. For instance, I remember hearing, I live in New York City, I remember walking on I believe it's 6th Avenue, and there are these huge clocks on the street.
Yeah.
And the small hand would have a ticking sound. And immediately when I heard that ticking sound, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what is that? And it turns out that it was the small hand of a clock that I hadn't heard for many years. So I so appreciate you sharing that story.
Oh, that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I learned to get used to my wife's voice and my children's sound and so forth, because I never heard them talk for many, many, many years. So life goes on as I get used to my wife. And then one time, to give it a little humor to you, I never realized that I looked for my wife at our home, and she was on the phone, and I said to her, I never realized you talked so much. Because I've heard her on the phone to other people. So anyway, there's much more. Oh, I found on a.
Wait, I'm gonna show Mom. Right,
I can
get
say-
a little.
Hi, Mom.
Hello. Hello, it's so nice to meet with you face to face.
Of course. Absolutely. I'm so happy to be meeting with all of you. Well, Saul, I want to take us back to your original diagnosis, because I feel like I could probably speak to you for an entire afternoon, and maybe we'll have a chance to do that another time. But I would love to hear more from you about your original diagnosis with Usher syndrome, and if you can remember what that was like and what the progression for you of coming to terms with understanding what that even meant. But I want to tell you, before I have you start, that as you're speaking, I am nodding furiously, because you are saying so many things that resonate with me. And I'm smiling big, first because I'm so excited to be speaking with you, but also because I really appreciate what you said, which is life goes on.
Yeah.
And so difficult when you have a condition like what we have to be able to have that perspective. So I appreciate you saying life goes on. I think it's a huge mantra that people could really resonate from it and live with. So we'd like to hear about your diagnosis.
That they want to hear about your life and when you were diagnosed.
Okay. Right. I believe I was about 7 or 8 years old, and they started to give hearing tests in the public school, and the nurse who gave the hearing test in every classroom told me I did not hear what she was saying. And she wrote a letter for me to bring to my mother, and that's when I went to the Mass Eye and Ear, and I was tested there, which took a long time, and I had about a 60 to 70% hearing loss. So they outfitted me with hearing aids at that time, and this was going to the late 1940s already. And
Wow.
And the first hearing aid that I wore was the size of a cigar box.
Wow.
With big batteries I had to carry in my pocket and so forth. But over time, the hearing aid industry improved the manufacturing of hearing aids. And then by the time I got married, which I was 27, I had binaural hearing. I had it made into one box, but 2 separate controls, volume and so forth. But no one knew what was wrong with my eyes. And the eye problem, the visual problem, no one could identify what the problem was with my eyes. And I can remember when I was 18 years old, I had to sign up for the military draft, and all the doctors that were doing the examination, they were looking at my eyes, but they looked inside my eyes as if I had gold in it. Yeah.
Wow.
I said, what are you guys doing? Why are you all looking into my eyes? And they could not tell me anything because they never saw anything, whatever I had in my eyes, and they classified me as 4F. So at about that time,
Wait, what does 4F mean? 4F.
4F means you're not eligible for the draft. And
Got it.
so at about that,
But you were wearing glasses then, right?
yes, I was wearing glasses.
But you said you could never see the stars or...
Through life, I could never see the stars in the sky. And though I was able to see the Big Dipper, but there are millions of stars in the sky, but I could never find one. Mm-hmm. And so many times when I wanted to go to the movie, I was always holding on to my little brother's hand because I could never find a seat. So he had to lead me to sit. If not, I'll be sitting on somebody else's lap.
I've done it.
Yeah. Well, so different things came to me, and then I would never know that I had Usher Syndrome because the first specialist was Dr. Saul. Does that name mean anything to you?
She's nodding yes.
Yes, I know the name, but I'm trying to remember why. Why do I remember that name?
Doesn't remember why.
Okay, Dr. Saul. He was not a Mass General. He was on West Cedar Street, which runs off Mass General, but he was like a creator, and he became a fundraiser. And the person that really focused in Usher Syndrome was Dr. Elliot Burson.
Yes.
And I was his first patient. But he graduated Harvard, and he specialized with a grant to study Usher Syndrome and retinitis pigmentosa. So the way it summed up was with the hearing loss and the vision deterioration, they considered that as Usher Syndrome. But there were no numbers at that time. But later on, I found out that I was Usher Syndrome number two. So, but today there are many numbers of different types of Usher Syndrome. And I have read some of the things in your book that you wrote, that when you look through a hole in the straw, that is what you see. If you can get your eye focused on the hole of a straw. But that was similar to what I had to suffer through. Mm-hmm. Today, I have no vision at all other than clouds and shadows and so forth. So I consider myself having Usher Syndrome. But what really opened up my life was the advanced bionic, and I wore one of the very first hearing aids, the implant that they made, and Dr. Navarro at the MIT did the surgery, and that's when I immediately advanced. in my hearing through my life.
Right. And Saul, are you implanted on one side or on both sides?
So she wants to.
I'm implanted on one side, on my one side. And the reason why I only show to be one side is because sometimes if I fall down or walk into a wall, if I break what was the inside, at least I have the other side available. So if I needed another surgery, I am not in favor of having the implant on both sides, especially for children.
Okay. So I want to ask you another question, because in so many ways, you are the pioneer of Usher syndrome. You really went through this when people had very little information, at least in a more general way. Certainly, this was way before the internet, way before we had access to what was happening in different parts of the country and the world in terms of diagnosing people with Usher syndrome. I can tell you, when I was diagnosed with Usher syndrome, which was in about 1998, maybe it was 1999, but around that time, Usher syndrome type 3, what I have, did not yet exist, meaning they had not yet identified my gene. So even though we, in many ways, were decades apart in terms of our diagnoses, I very much can understand sort of what that experience was like of being diagnosed with Usher syndrome, but not knowing specifically what type. So I'm wondering for you, as you've had to acclimate to vision loss, one of the things that so many of us have to do, because we were raised really as hearing and sighted people, and we progressively lost our ability to hear and see. Obviously, we're very fortunate to have cochlear implants to give us access to sound. But did you ever consider, or what were your thoughts about potentially learning Braille? What other types of accommodations have you either created for yourself formally or informally to adapt to your vision loss? For instance, there are many things in my own home that I know simply based on touch. I don't even rely on my vision. I rely so much on my sense of touch. And I've created these ways of accessing information and my environment based on these personal accommodations I've created. In what ways have you done that? And what was your experience in terms of considering learning Braille?
When I first was installed with Advanced Bionic, I started to take lessons in Braille at the Carroll School in Newton. But once I started that, and I realized how much the implant helped me, I did not go any further to learn Braille, because the people in my world all knows how to talk. And that was good enough for me, because I was in business and I was working and so forth. But the way I had communicate with people I've never seen before, I use a method called POP, print on palm. They put the word and they dash it out, put a dash, and that way I was able to communicate with people in my family are very close to me. And so, for instance, if you print POP on the palm of your hand, that will say pop. And then you draw a line with your other hand, and then the next word will start. For many years, that is how I communicated with my wife. And we have gone and traveled to Florida many years, and my wife will write and drive the sceneries as we go by them, as we travel our way down south. Yeah.
That is amazing. What an incredible ability to be able to. I'm a little scared envisioning your wife driving and doing POP in your hand, but we're here today, so I'm trusting that it's worked okay.
Yeah, well, she's the driver and I'm the passenger, so I just hold my hand out like it was a blackboard, and then she prints it on the blackboard, and my hand, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
My daughter wants me.
Oh no, and about how you do the tacking.
Okay, and that was the way my wife and I communicated for many, many years. And even when we went into restaurants and so forth, there were many restaurants that were dark, and so she can print like a typewriter on my hand underneath the table, so no one could see what she was doing or so forth. But for years, my wife played a major part in my life, as well as in my business.
Right. And Saul, so I know that you have many interests, that Usher Syndrome is simply a part of your life, that you're dynamic, you've had a very rich and full life. And I know that you're very interested in the stock markets and in world events. Can you tell me what it is about the stock markets and world events that you enjoy so much?
Well, that from many, many years ago, when I was in my 20s, the first grouping of customers that we had in our clothing business, they were all brokers, like from Merrill Lynch and so forth. And I just became interested in learning whatever I can about businesses and so forth. But I would say it was a hobby of mine. But now I have no resources to know what's going on in the world of businesses and so forth. But I still love playing the stock market, just like someone likes playing football. I love to, whatever I can, know something about a football game. So I usually have some friends, they were able to interpretate the game to me. And I would get a good feeling out of understanding the football game.
And Saul, I'm wondering for you, with your loss of vision over the years, what was that like for you to have to start asking people for help? How was it for you to start recognizing that you needed help? And how do you feel about it now? One of the things that I have found is that people with Usher syndrome are often fiercely independent, and they don't want to have to ask people for help or even admit that they need help. And yet sometimes I think when we're able to do that, we're able to be far more independent than we would be if we simply refuse help from others. What has that process been like for you in recognizing your need for help from others?
I was lucky to have. I have 3 children, and they're all like I would say middle aged. They're in their 50s and so forth, and my wife. And I was never in a position where I might need help or not. I've always had someone around me that would assist me, whether I was at one time in a business, resale business. I've always had someone with me, and they would. The one thing I did do was I was an excellent lip reader. Lip reading. I used to see the face at one time in my life, and lip reading is very important once you're able to capture the lip reading mechanism, because the face shows shadows and so forth, and how the facial remark, they make markings on the face. And I was an excellent lip reader up to a certain age. I even lip read for politicians and so forth, because they wanted me to tell the speaker who's running for office what other people were saying, and then I had to read their lips and report to the one guy who's running for politician. To me, that's a joke. So,
of course, and it's hilarious. And I think many of us who have spent so many years lip reading, we oftentimes have people who say to us, hey, I need you to lip read this person. I remember going to baseball games with my brothers and my dad, and they would always ask me to lip read. And I said, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Oh, God. Well, growing up, I was a very good lip reader. I mean, you had to lip read when you went to high school, and I did go to college for 1 year, and then I gave it up, only because the professors and the teachers, they had a habit to walk around the room, and in the room there are 200 students, and they all look out the window, and they don't look directly at the student. So after one semester in my second year, I gave up my college career, or whatever career it was, and I became interested more in the business that I was involved in at the time.
So what you're saying is that when you were in college, when you were in school, these days, Saul, there are so many services that are provided to students with disabilities, and we're constantly advocating on behalf of people with both vision and hearing loss, and students in particular. This is access that you never had access to. These are things that were not even a consideration for you. And I give you tremendous credit, because I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been. And yet you persevered and said, this isn't for me, and I am going to go pursue something that makes me feel empowered and where I can pursue my interests. So I give you tremendous credit for doing that.
Yeah. What you are saying is absolutely 100%, because the year was 1953. 1953, I was just 18 years old, and it was too frustrating for me to get notes and to find out what the teachers were saying or the professors, that I just gave up on it. And I had another opportunity, was to enter the retail trade with my father and brother, and that is where I ended up.
I'm so glad that you had that. So I'm wondering, are there memories from your childhood that really stick with you? Memories that you have that just hold it is true to you, and that you still can sort of conjure up today as though almost they were yesterday? And also, are there memories from raising your own children that really stick with you to this day?
Yes, I do. They do. As I remember the second grade, the teachers were much more kinder when I was in the second grade, the teachers always let me sit in the front row, usually at the first desk, and they were more considerate. And they had a much better understanding of what the handicap is all about, and they were much kinder and more considerate.
And Miss Fellman let you sit on her lap.
What?
Miss Fellman let you sit on her
Yeah.
lap.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what was that? I'd like to hear this story.
Yeah. There was a teacher, because at that time, teachers were not allowed to get married. I don't know if you realize that.
No, I didn't know that. This is new information to me. Wow. Okay, go ahead.
So my wife mentioned Miss Spellman because sometimes I cried, and so she let me sit on her lap to alleviate whatever was bothering me. No, but that goes back many years ago. Today I'm 85 years old, and I still have a strong mind and a good memory. And I feel I'm missing a lot in the world, but I can live with it, I suppose. I love the movies and so forth. So to pass the time, I do a lot of reading now. I have special books that I order from the Perkins School Library, and I love to read. And I have to give my wife credit, because once I got implanted in 1995, 1996, she made me read books to pass the time, and I must have read well over 1,000 books.
Oh my gosh.
But I like reading books about anything and everything. Ancient history, how about old ancient China, the European countries, and so forth. I'm very.
Yeah, and you listened to her book.
What?
And you listened to her
No,
book.
and I listened to your book too. And what amazes me is you skiing down the snows of Kilimanjaro.
Never again.
What?
Never again.
Yeah, I remember that. And then you like to go swimming.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're daring and you're a daredevil.
I am. And my mom hasn't slept ever since.
Right. So anyway,
What about something with your children?
something with my children. Well, my children, they helped me whenever I needed help, but I have to give most of my credit to Marjorie, because she was the main force for me to learn and for help as life goes on. And she is the main force.
Well, you don't have to say that, Dad.
Huh?
You don't have to say that.
Yes, he does. Go ahead. Accept the compliment. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you are the main force because the other two are busy in their own world. So I enjoyed Marjorie. I could not do all the things that you are able to do, because there is so much paperwork to be filled out, and I could never do all the paperwork that is necessary, such as paying bills and visiting the various doctors for different issues and so forth. So anyways,
well, Saul, I have another question for you, and I completely understand how laborious the paperwork is, because you're right, paperwork in general is very far from accessible for people like you and me. I'm so curious to know how you and your wife met.
Ooh.
Oh, how did we meet?
Why don't you move a little
How
closer?
did we meet?
How did you and your wife meet?
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I was introduced.
A little closer.
Yeah.
Audrey.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
gonna see if I can
introduced.
get them. There, okay.
Okay, I was introduced to my wife.
Audrey, it's okay.
My parents had a summer place in Revere Beach, and the people next door were friends of my wife. And they say they have a lovely young lady for me, and that would be Zelda. So I went and I gave her a call. And at that time, you have to appreciate I wore glasses and I wore hearing aids. But I don't remember if I wore 2 hearing aids or 1. And so I had a date, and she accepted my date. She was only 18, and I was 22. And it was when I picked her up, I saw her white teeth and how beautiful she looked. And I went dancing with her at the totem pole at that time in Newton. And I had such a wonderful time with her. And I started to date her for a few months and so forth. Then all of a sudden, one time I asked her to go out with me on a weekend and so forth, and she refused me because we thought we were getting too serious. And so Zelda, she was only 18, 19 years old, and then she broke her heart. And when she did not go out with me and so forth, so it took me 4.5 years, 5 years, and I would drive by her house and I'd say, I'm going to marry that girl if it's the last thing I do. So I rang her bell. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I went up the stairs because she lived in a 3-family house. And when I got to the top stairs, my heart was beating like a big drum. And I answered the phone at the door, and I said, "Are you available?" And she said, "Yes." And the white teeth, I jumped for joy. So, sure enough, that was in September. And then in January, I bought her a diamond ring, and then we got married the following June of 1962.
Wow.
We met, and now we are still married.
How many years has it been?
We're married 58 years.
Wow.
No. Yes.
Yeah. So,
It's a lot of years.
yeah, but my wife is a good singer, and she sang to me, and we do a lot of wonderful things together.
Wow. I am so touched by this story. I'm more touched by your perseverance.
That's
You knew this was the woman you were going to marry, and you made it happen.
right.
What?
Your perseverance.
Yes.
That you knew you wanted to marry her and you made it
Oh,
happen.
yeah. I had a few days before, but once they saw me with glasses and 2 hearing aids, it was there was never a second date after that.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, I was so grateful, and I loved my wife Zelda, and I still love her today.
Which not everyone can say, by the way. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think now, today, I appreciate what you said about having all of these interests and feeling like in many ways there's a lack of access to the information that you would like to be able to follow, whether it's the stock markets or world events, which, if I'm being completely honest, I think this is a good time not to be following world events, although you didn't ask me my opinion. But
Well,
Finish talking.
yeah. Are you finished talking?
No.
oh, well, I was going to ask you so you listen to so many books, it seems, so you really keep yourself engaged and informed. I want to hear more about the process, because so many of us struggle with that process of loss. We live with loss on a continual basis, right? And what was that process, and has that process been like for you? And how have you been able to arrive to that conclusion of life goes on?
Well, a lot has to do with the books that I've been reading, and the Perkins School Library. They have catalogs of thousands of books, and in order, when I got catalogs, of course, I could not read the catalog because they were all printed, and I can't read print. So my wife will help me to select books and so forth. Yes.
Okay. No, I think she wants to know about how have you handled the losing your vision over time, and how you get information in a different way now, like from your special phones. You used to have the reading machine.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that everything you're saying is perfect.
Okay.
She wants to know how you handle losing vision over time.
Well, it's like eating. Well, I don't cry over it. I mean, I wish I had vision, but I'm so used to being blind that it doesn't bother me to be blind.
Mm-hmm.
I have no fear of being blind because I've been blind so long. And of course, I wish I was able to see and so forth, but I handle it like nothing else, like it's part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think what I enjoy doing mostly is reading books, and the books that we selected give me a base of what life is all about. And I owe that to my wife because she's the one that selects and read from the various catalogs that Perkins Library send out to us. And from the book is where I get my education. I don't get that from, I have 3 brothers, and I don't get that from my brothers at all. They contribute anything as far as learning experience to my life.
What about the phones in your office?
Okay, yeah. Well, that came in my office. I have a couple of phones that are programmed, and I keep the most important people in my life already programmed. So if I wanted to talk to my friend like Loyal or anybody else, or Lenny Geller, or someone else.
But tell Loyal's background.
I will. And Loyal is a good friend of mine. He came from where I used to live. He's a wonderful person, and he's 76, and he is a speech therapist. So we like to read books together, and I was fortunate enough to introduce myself, and actually my wife introduced him to where we used to live in Middleborough at that time. And so, I have two separate phones. So if I cannot memorize everybody's telephone number and I can't read them, so I try to program them in such a way I know where I can reach someone that is very important to my life, such as my three children or my wife or
But also, what about the news line and the things you listen to, the news line on the phone?
yeah. Well, one of the telephones, I can listen to the news line and so forth. But I don't like spending a lot of time listening to the news line and so forth. So I just go on about my life and try to exercise whenever possible and so forth.
Wow. Saul, I also like to listen to books. I use Bookshare, which is a database that we can discuss maybe after this call. We can swap good, accessible options for reading. What I love about reading is that it completely takes me away from the present, and I learn so much about different parts of history, world, just like you described. I want to ask you lastly, and I'm hoping we can continue this conversation at another time because there are so many more questions I want to ask you, and I'm only sorry I can't be with you in person. But what's that?
Very nice talking with you.
Wait, she wants to say something.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wanted to know what your favorite form of exercise is, because as you know, I love to exercise as well. It's how I manage my stress and anxiety. So I'd like to hear from you if there's a particular exercise you enjoy doing most, given your vision and hearing limitations.
Well, walking would be the best exercise, but I do have a machine, a new machine where we are living. It's called, it's sort of exercise
New Step.
Right.
It's called a New Step.
Yeah, and I enjoyed using that machine. But years ago, I used to exercise a lot when I was in my 20s. And when I say exercise, I mean like lifting weights and so forth.
Wow.
But that was years ago. But today, with my wife, and I can only do so much as far as exercise. And to me, the best exercise would be walking and so forth.
What about dancing?
Oh, well,
he's a great dancer.
I love to dance. Well, that's another thing. Once I got my implant and the whole world opened up, I became a very good dancer. I've always was a good dancer, and I love to dance fast, and I dance to Elvis Presley, the Platters, to you name it. And I have a good body rhythm. I love to dance. But, years ago, I was not able to hear the music. So now I like to dance, and that's what I like to do.
And you love listening to music again.
I love to listen to music, and my daughters like to dance with me, too, because they know I'm a good dancer. So anyway, it's just that's what I like to do. I've always been a good dancer ever since I was a teenager.
Wow. Well, Saul, when we're able to meet at some point in person, I would love to dance with you and have you teach me some moves.
Oh, I will be so happy to do that for you.
I would love that. And Saul, I want to invite Nancy back onto the call here. There's so much more that we didn't cover that I'm hoping you and I can plan a time just to Zoom or call again so that I can keep asking you all of these questions. You are such a light. It is so wonderful to hear your experience and your stories. And everything you shared only makes me want to ask you more.
Oh,
Good.
Yeah. But should he end with his funniest story of his entire?
What's that?
Should he end with the funniest story of his entire life?
Yes.
Dad, tell the funniest story quickly.
Oh.
When you were a buyer in New York and you went to the theater.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I own a group of women's shops, and I was a big buyer when I go to New York, but I never went alone. And the owner of a manufacturer asked me if I want to go to a play, and sure enough, I said only if it's a musical, and I said way up front. So sure enough, after we worked out the line, it was a coat line, and the owner came out and he said that I should meet him with my girl at a theater on Broadway in New York, and the name of the play was Walking Happily. So sure enough, when we got there, I was able to sit, we were sitting on the first row. I couldn't believe to see a play on the first row, but he, I guess, had connection. And in front of me, there was a brass rail. And on the rail, there was a drake that goes down to the floor. But you know, I'm tall, I was 6 feet tall, and my feet was going like this, tapping to the music, and happily, happily, happily. And all of a sudden, behind the stage, a man got up, a bald-headed man got up from the other side of the curtain, and he said to me, would I mind getting my foot off his head?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The conductor?
Oh.
I didn't know there was a pit.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
Well, so I was a little embarrassed, but everyone got a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, and you were able to enjoy the show while tapping on his head.
Yeah.